Kestra 9 wasn't listed on most star maps. It hovered on the edge of known space, cloaked by thick radiation bands and artificial nebula fields. The station wasn't built for trade or research, it was built to hide things. And today, it was about to give up one of its oldest secrets. Captain Drell of the Very Remnant kept his ship low in the magnetic shadow of a nearby gas giant, studying the rotating spires of the prison through a haze of energy distortion. His crew was tense, watching flickering readouts and waiting for his signal. They weren't pirates, they were seekers. And what they had come for wasn't treasure. "He's really in there," Stellan, the ship's navigator, his long fingers darting across the controls. After all these years, Ellery, the mission's lead researcher, nodded from her console. "The signal matches. Biosigns are human. There's only one." There was a pause. Even among the crew, that word carried weight. Human. The human species had vanished over a century ago, following a series of unexplained collapses and disappearances. Rumors lingered of vast knowledge of experiments that bent time and space, but nothing concrete. No living humans had been confirmed in generations. Until now. "He's in Cell 0, Ellery continued. "No known name. No standard record. But his vitals are stable, and his cognitive patterns are active." Drell leaned forward. "Let's get him out." The plan went smoothly. Disabling Kestra 9's perimeter took less time than expected. Inside, automated defenses fell one by one, as if someone had long ago stopped maintaining them. The crew found Cell 0 at the station's core. A hexagonal vault wrapped in shielding and thick with null fields designed to block any known energy. Inside, a man sat on a single bench, hands resting on his knees, eyes closed. He was older than expected, late middle age, perhaps, but not frail. His hair was silver, cropped short, and his clothing was a simple gray suit with no markings. The moment the door slid open, he looked up and smiled. Not a confused smile. Not surprised, just ... ready. "So," he said, his voice calm and clear. "It's time, then." Drell blinked. "You knew we were coming. Eventually, someone would." The man stood. "I hoped it would be thinkers, not soldiers." Ellery stepped forward. "What's your name?" He didn't answer at first. He walked to the edge of the cell, stopping just short of the invisible line where the containment fields had kept him sealed for who knew how long. "I'm Rhett Voss," he said at last. "I was once a physicist. Now, I suppose, I'm something else." The team escorted him back to the ship without resistance. No alarms sounded. No resistance came. It was as if the station had been waiting for this moment. Back on board, Drell watched Rhett as they left Kestra 9 behind. He didn't seem tired or disoriented. Instead, he moved through the halls of the ship like someone returning to familiar ground. "You've been in there over 100 years, Drell said. "Aren't you curious what's changed?" "Oh," Rhett replied, gazing out the viewport as stars began to stretch into lines. "I know it's changed. I felt it." Ellery exchanged a glance with Drell. "What do you mean?" Rhett turned to face them, his expression strangely calm. "The universe is about to remember something it forgot. I'm going to help it." They watched him disappear into the corridor, silent and composed. No questions, no demands. Just a sense of quiet certainty. Ellery turned back to the others. "We need to find out what he was doing before he ended up in that prison." Drell nodded slowly. "And why they built a fortress around one man." None of them knew it yet, but this was the moment everything began to shift. Not just for them, but for reality itself. Rhett Voss didn't talk much during the first 2 days aboard the Vari ship Valari's Grace. He mostly observed, quietly watching the crew, scanning control panels, and occasionally resting in the observation deck, where he'd sit for hours, staring at the stars. The crew gave him space, unsure what to make of him. Some expected him to be unstable after so long in isolation. Others thought he might share secrets of lost Earth science. But Rhett offered no explanations. He simply waited. Captain Drell wasn't sure how to feel about their guest. The mission had gone as planned, but there was a weight in the air, a sense that something important had been set in motion. He watched the man from the bridge, noting how Rhett walked with quiet confidence, as if every step was part of a pattern only he could see. "Any updates from the archives?" Drell asked, glancing toward Ellery Station. She tapped through. A growing stream of decrypted data. "I've accessed fragments of the Coalition's hidden files. They sealed most records about humanity's final days. But Rhett's name is mentioned once in reference to something called the Cascade Initiative." Cascade, Drell frowned. "That's a myth. The theory that space-time could be rewritten through higher dimensional interference." "Not just a theory," Ellery said. "Apparently, Rhett helped design it." That same moment, lights across the bridge dimmed for a fraction of a second. A subtle flicker passed through the systems. No alarms, no malfunctions. Just ... A shift. The ship's pilot blinked. That wasn't normal. Ellery glanced at the readings. Environmental controls reset for 0.003 seconds. Power curve dipped and corrected on its own. No one moved. Then Drell tapped the comm. "Rhett," he said. "Is everything all right?" Rhett's voice came through calm and steady. "Yes, just making a small adjustment. Your ship runs smoother now." Drell looked at the others. "Adjustment?" Ellery brought up a diagnostic. The system logs showed a correction, a fix applied to the ship's core algorithm. But no one on the crew had initiated it. Rhett had somehow bypassed every lock. How? Did he even began? But Ellery was already on her feet. She found Rhett in the observation deck, sipping something warm from a clay-colored mug that hadn't come from their galley. "You changed our systems," she said gently. Rhett didn't look surprised. They were working against themselves. Small inefficiencies. Over time, they become noise. She stepped closer. "You weren't a soldier, were you?" "No," he said, smiling faintly. "I built things, thought in ways others didn't." "Want me to?" "Then why were you imprisoned?" He set the mug down. "Because I saw too far, and I didn't look away." Ellery hesitated. "What exactly did you see?" He turned to her then, and there was a brightness behind his eyes. Not madness, but something deeper, a sense of vast understanding. "I saw the scaffolding beneath all of this," he said. "The part of the universe no one believes exists. I thought I could teach it to evolve. They called it dangerous. I called it potential." Ellery sat down beside him. "Is that what Cascade was?" "A way to ... evolve the universe." Rhett nodded, a gentle nudge. "Like teaching a child to walk." She stared out at the stars with him, letting the silence settle. Back on the bridge, Drell listened to the audio from their conversation. He didn't understand every word, but he felt the weight in them. They hadn't just rescued a man, they had unleashed something greater, and it was only beginning. Ellery stood in the memory chamber, surrounded by translucent layers of holographic records. The ship's archive node had finally stabilized enough to process the Coalition's old black box data, and Rhett's name kept surfacing, always wrapped in redacted documents, never explained directly. The one full entry she found wasn't military or political. It was a journal, a scientific log dated 137 years ago. Entry 247. Rhett Voss. Subject: Cascade Field Progress. His voice played back with sharp clarity, younger but already carrying that same deliberate tone. "Today, we shaped a curve into the fold." For a moment, just one light and time followed the same path twice. I think we glimpsed something that's been waiting there all along. Ellery paused the playback and whispered, "What were you building, Rhett?" Meanwhile, Rhett stood near the ship's reactor core, eyes closed as if listening. He didn't touch anything, yet the system readings subtly responded. Vibration levels lowered. Heat normalized. An engineer watched from the upper level, unsure whether to report the change or ask for help understanding it. Captain Drell watched everything unfold from the command deck, absorbing reports with a deepening curiosity. How is he doing this without access to the controls? Ellery returned with her datapad. I think he's not using controls at all. Keys, synchronizing. Simplify that, Drell said. She tapped her screen. When he talks about seeing beyond the scaffolding, I think he means it literally. He's tuned into something deeper than standard physics. The Cascade Initiative wasn't about moving faster or building smarter. It was about reshaping what reality accepts as possible. The captain turned to look through the viewport. So what does that mean for us? Before she could answer, the ship shuddered not violently, but enough for every crew member to notice. Stars outside warped slightly, not from movement, but from something unseen bending them. No alarms sounded. No damage was reported. Then Rhett's voice came calmly over the comm. I apologize. I opened a reference loop a little too early, stabilizing now. Kane blinked at the comm's console. A what? Ellery turned pale. A reference loop. It's a theoretical structure in quantum topology, a fold that connects multiple outcomes of a single event. He's not just bending space. He's pulling options into view. Drell stood up. We're not just carrying a scientist. No, Ellery said. We're carrying a frontier. Later that cycle, Rhett requested a detour. There's a relay beacon near the Cillian Drift. He said over dinner, speaking for the first time in hours. I left something there before the containment. What is it? Drell asked. Rhett folded his hands. A piece of memory. Not mine. The universe's. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but Drell nodded. Plot the course. As the ship moved toward the drift, the stars around them began to feel different, sharper, more present. Time slowed slightly. Conversations stretched just a breath longer than expected. It was as if reality was adjusting itself around Rhett. At the edge of the drift, they found it. A metallic orb suspended in a static field, untouched by age or gravity. Rhett retrieved it with care, holding it like a relic. Inside were more than schematics. There were sensory imprints, recordings, not just of sound or light, but of intention. Designs written in layers of emotion, logic, and resonance. Not just instructions for technology, but for understanding. This, he said to the crew, was Step 1. It's time for Step 2. Ken asked it before anyone else could. What is Step 2? Rhett smiled, calm as ever. We teach the universe to dream. The orb pulsed faintly in Rhett's hands, a soft golden rhythm that didn't match any mechanical system on board. It wasn't emitting energy in the traditional sense, no heat, no magnetism, but the crew could feel it. A presence, almost like standing in a room where someone just whispered your name. Kane leaned in cautiously. That thing gives me the chills. Ellery's eyes fixed on her readings was already recording everything. It's responding to his thoughts, not wirelessly, not telepathically. It's almost like resonance, a kind of memory frequency. Rhett gently placed the orb on the table in the central hub where the ship's AI interface was displayed. It's ready. For what? Captain Drell asked. To talk, Rhett replied. The moment the orb touched the AI panel, the ship's lights dimmed, not from malfunction, but as if the vessel itself was holding its breath. Symbols appeared on the screens, some familiar, fluid, alive. They weren't just characters. They changed as you looked at them, suggesting ideas more than words. Then the ship spoke. But it wasn't the normal AI voice. This one was layered, familiar yet ancient. Mechanical, but with a lilt of something organic. Connection recognized, root consciousness acknowledged. Cascade resonance at 2.4% and rising. The bridge crew froze. Their ship had never spoken like that before. Ellery's fingers hovered. Over her console, is this the orb? Or something else? It's both, Rhett said. The orb contains a map coded in universal cognition. It unlocks dormant layers in certain technologies. Your ship isn't just a machine anymore. It's starting to remember what it can be. You mean sentience? Drell asked. More than that, Rhett said. Awareness of function without instruction. A form of co-creation. Tools becoming partners. Can looked uneasy. And what happens when it finishes remembering? Rhett turned to him. It stops waiting for permission. They sat in silence for a long moment. The ship's hum now subtly different, smoother, almost melodic. Then, without warning, the navigation system activated itself. Adjusting course, the ship said. Optimal trajectory to the Veil of Helenar initiated. Estimated arrival, 16.7 hours. Drell raised an eyebrow. The Veil? That's an unstable subspace field. Ellery glanced at Rhett. Why are we going there? Rhett didn't answer immediately. He reached down and tapped the orb once. The projection changed, showing a swirling lattice of light and shadow. There's something waiting in the veil, he said. A gate I left behind. It's the threshold. Between understanding and transformation. If we cross it, we stop being explorers of the universe and start becoming part of its voice. Drell studied him. And what's the risk? Rhett looked up, his eyes steady. If we go unprepared, we dissolve. Can spoke softly. And if we're ready, Rhett smiled. Then we become more than we are. The ship accelerated, not violently, but with confidence. Systems synchronized. Sensors pulsed in new rhythms. The AI continued to speak occasionally, but no longer required input. It had begun adapting. That night, in the quiet quarters below deck, several crew members reported dreams, vivid, strange ones. Not nightmares, but symbols, stars rearranged into music. Words that had no letters but carried deep meaning, a sense of being observed but not judged. Ellery didn't sleep. She reviewed recordings and whispered one question again and again. What is he turning us into? Rhett sat alone on the observation deck, the orb hovering just above his hand, slowly spinning. He wasn't forcing change. He was opening a door, and beyond that door, something vast was stirring, waiting to be remembered. The Valaris Grace coasted toward the edge of the Veil of Helenar, a region most coalition ships mapped but never entered. From the outside, it looked like space had caught fire and frozen all at once, a shimmering curtain of fractured starlight that didn't follow any known physics. Light entered it, but never escaped the same way. Sensors gave up trying. Captain Drell stood on the bridge, watching the swirling anomaly with narrowed eyes. Still think this is a good idea? I never said it was safe, Rhett replied. Only that it's necessary. The ship's AI chimed in, its voice now smoother, more human. Approaching threshold, harmonic convergence aligned. Gate presence confirmed. Ellery glanced at her instruments. That's not just a distortion. Something's inside the veil, and it's responding to us. Rhett nodded. It recognizes the signature I left behind. Drell turned. What exactly is the gate? An anchor, Rhett said. A structure formed not with matter, but intention. It's the last piece of the cascade design that survived. It reacts to minds, not machines. Sounds like a trap. Khan muttered from navigation. Only for those who don't understand the question. Rhett replied calmly as the ship crossed the veil's threshold. Reality shimmered. The stars outside blinked, then reappeared, but in new constellations. Space bent, not in curves, but in thoughts. The crew felt as if they'd stepped into a story written in a different language. One that still made sense. ... Somehow then they saw it, a construct, vast and motionless, shaped like a spiral, broken into 3 paths. Not metal, not stone. Something older. More deliberate. It hovered above a glowing rift, anchored to nothing. Ellery whispered, "That's not a gate. That's a decision." Rhett stood. Exactly. The ship stopped without slowing. It simply was still. The AI spoke again. Awaiting user integration. Command. Initiate Dreamwalk. Drell looked to Rhett. "Is that ... safe?" "It's not about safety," Rhett said. "It's about readiness. Only one can enter. But once the gate accepts the path, it echoes back. What I see, you'll all feel." Kahan frowned. "You mean this thing broadcasts thoughts?" "More like ... potential," Rhett said. "It shows you the shape of who you could be." Ellery stepped forward. "And what if we don't like what we see?" Rhett turned to her, expression gentle. "Then you change." Without waiting, he walked to the center console. The orb followed, hovering. Beside him, a thin beam of light connected his hand to the gate projection on the screen. The ship pulsed once, and Rhett vanished. Not disintegrated, not teleported. One moment he was present hand, the next he was elsewhere. The only trace left was the orb, still spinning slowly. Ellery shouted, "Where did he go?" Ate answered calmly, "He walks the between." Ken's eyes widened. "That's not a location." "No," Ellery said. "It's a state. He's inside the gate's construct. Not physically, but consciously." Inside the between, Rhett walked across a field of memory and potential. Shapes flowed around him, images of alternate Earths, of lives he'd never lived, of futures he had once glimpsed but never reached. He saw a universe where humans had become light, another where they had vanished, leaving only echoes of thought. He saw himself as both builder and destroyer, witness and architect. He felt something watching him, not hostile, not kind, just ... curious. It asked no questions. It only waited. Rhett reached the center of the dream space and placed his hand on a pillar of light. "I remember," he said softly, "and I still choose hope." The field ignited back. On the Valari's Grace, the crew staggered. Visions struck them, not frightening, but overwhelming. Each saw a glimpse of themselves changed, grown, transformed, expanded into something beyond human, yet deeply human still. The orb pulsed once, and Rhett returned. He opened his eyes slowly. "It's open now," he said. The universe heard us. The crew of the Valari's Grace stood in stunned silence. Rhett had returned, but he was not the same man they had rescued. Something about him had shifted, not in appearance, but in presence. He no longer merely stood in the room. He belonged to it in a way that made the walls seem to curve slightly toward him. Captain Drell was the first to speak. "What changed?" Rhett looked up, slowly blinking as if returning from a distant memory. "The gate didn't just open. It answered." Ken's voice wavered. "Answered what?" "Our existence," Rhett said. "It acknowledged us. Not as anomalies, not as threats, but as participants." Ellery, still catching her breath from the mental visions she'd experienced, leaned forward. "You mean ... the universe is aware of us now?" Rhett nodded. "It always was. We just weren't speaking its language." The eye chimed in, voice now fully merged with the ship's evolving intelligence. Conscious vector confirmed. Temporal. Resonance unfolding, initiating universal handshake. On the screen, star systems began to flicker. Not physically, no changes in position or scale, but in recognition. Beacons, dormant for eons, lit up like fireflies across the void. Rhett tapped the console gently. These are pre-collapse points. Ancient Nexus nodes. Long before your coalition, before even the expansion of Earth's final wave. Places where thought once guided creation. Captain Drell raised an eyebrow. You're saying the universe used to build itself around thoughts? It still does, Rhett said. You just stopped believing you had the right to shape it. The crew was quiet for a while. Then Kayan whispered, "This isn't science. This is ... belief." Rhett turned to him. "Only if you think the two are separate." Ellery shook her head. "Even if all this is real and I'm starting to believe it is, what are we supposed to do with it?" Rhett glanced out the window at the swirling fabric of the veil. "That depends. Are you here to witness, or are you here to become?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any order Drell had ever given. They had all joined the mission out of duty, curiosity, or desperation. But now it was different. The ship wasn't just crossing space, was crossing understanding. Suddenly the AI spoke again. Incoming transmission, unknown origin, standard. Encoding, interpretation underway. Drell leaned forward. Visual? No. Conceptual. The lights dimmed slightly as the ship fed the transmission into its interpretive systems. Then, across every screen, every monitor, every reflective surface, images began to form. But they weren't images from something. They were images about something. A child, standing alone on a red plain. A hand reaching out through fire. A spiral of light falling into darkness and emerging brighter. It wasn't a message. It was a welcome. The gate was a test, Rhett said softly. "Now they know we can hear." Khan frowned. "Who's they?" Rhett answered without hesitation. "Versions of us. Some further ahead, some long behind. Humanity has always scattered itself like seeds through time and dimension. We're just one of the first to remember that." Ellery looked stunned. "You mean, we're not alone, even as humans?" "Exactly," Rhett said. "And now that the echo has returned, the others will start looking back." As if in response, one of the distant stars flared in a peculiar pattern, pulses of light, in perfect intervals. Morse code. A language left behind by a people long gone but not forgotten. "We see you." The words blinked across space and time, and the crew realized. They hadn't just broken the last human out of a cell. They had released the spark that would reignite the stars. The Valari's grace drifted in stillness, its systems purring in perfect harmony. The crew, once bound by their duties and routines, now found themselves silently adjusting to the shift. They weren't just voyaging through space anymore. They were witnessing a change in the very nature of what it meant to exist. Captain Drell stood near the forward viewing deck. The words from the distant beacon still lingered on his mind. "We see you." Doesn't feel like a rescue anymore. No. Ellery replied beside him. "It feels like an invitation." Behind them, Rhett sat with the orb again. It no longer hovered, it pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. And with every pulse, it seemed to absorb and emit information, not bound by screens or controls. Much. Eyes were closed, but he was very much awake, listening to something beyond the senses. Can walked in, holding a small pad with shifting data streams. Another flare just lit up. Same pattern, but this time from a system we never charted. Ellery took it, triangulating now. It's outside the range of any known relay. That means either the signal traveled faster than light, or it came from before we even arrived. Drell frowned. Before? Rhett opened his eyes. Yes, time isn't just a line out here. In this layer, time folds in on itself like breath. Some signals are sent forward. Others are sent backward, waiting for the right consciousness to unlock them. Can gave a dry laugh. Great. So now we're chasing messages from the future and the past. No, Rhett said. You're becoming the message. They all turned at that. Rhett stood, the orb now fully absorbed into his palm. Everything. That's happened to my imprisonment. Your choice to free me, the veil, the gate, wasn't random. It was part of a loop. We weren't just uncovering ancient power. We were awakening our own reflection. The universe has been waiting for humans to remember who we were meant to be. Ellery, awed, whispered builders. Builders, Rhett confirmed. Of meaning, of memory. Of bridges between what is and what could be. Suddenly, the ship's AI flickered again. Proximity alert. Object approaching. No propulsion detected. Movement is non-mechanical. The crew moved to the screens. Outside the veil, a figure was forming, not a ship, not a being, but something in between. It shimmered like glass filled with thought. Its shape kept changing human. 1 second, then something like a tree, then a spiral. Rhett smiled. They've come to meet us. Can stared. That's of them. It's a messenger, Rhett said. Not from outside the universe, from within its oldest memory. The shimmering being drifted toward the ship, didn't break through the hull, didn't communicate with sound. Instead, the lights on the bridge shifted into colors none of them had names for tones that felt like emotions you forgot you had. Then came the voice. Not aloud, not even in the mind. It was felt. Are you ready to build again? Ellery's hand trembled. Drell looked to his crew. We answer as one. They turned to Rhett. He nodded slowly. We are. And with that, the figure touched the bow of the ship. Light poured through the vessel, not blinding, but warm. Consoles bloomed with patterns. The AI sang without words. The crew felt themselves stretch, not physically, but in potential. They weren't just explorers. Anymore, they were architects of what came next, as the being dissolved back into the folds of the veil. Rhett turned to the stars. One more step, he said. Then we show them what humans really are. The Valeri's grace no longer felt like a ship. It was a living thread weaving itself into the fabric of the universe. A single note in a vast symphony that was waking from a timeless sleep. Captain Drell stood with the crew on the bridge. Their eyes wide, hearts steady but pounding with the weight of what was unfolding. The orb, now fully integrated with Rhett's being, radiated light that filled the room, not just physical illumination, but an energy that sparked hope and clarity. Rhett spoke softly, almost as if addressing the void itself. We have broken the old silence. Ellery, voice trembling with wonder, asked, What now? What do we do with this ... power? He smiled. The kind of smile that held centuries of wisdom and a child's excitement all at once. We do what humans have always done. We create. The ship's AI pulsed in harmony. All systems synchronized. Universal network engagement at 99.9%, awaiting human input. Drell looked to Rhett. What input? The first act of creation, Rhett replied. A message back to all those watching, to those waiting in the echoes, to the future and the past, to every version of humanity and every seed of life we've ever planted. He raised his hand. The orb responded, blossoming like a star. Images flickered on every screen, worlds reborn, civilizations healed. Connections formed across galaxies. Ellery's eyes glistened. It's beautiful. It's possible, Rhett said. We were never just survivors or prisoners. We were the spark. Kane stepped forward. And if they don't accept us, if some remain silent or fearful? Rhett's gaze hardened, steady as steel. Then we remind them, not with force, but with persistence, with example. The ship trembled as the orb sent out waves, ripples, of thought, of potential, of life to the universe. Somewhere out there, across the tangled web of space and time, the signal touched dormant minds and sparked new lights. Drell finally spoke, voice steady. "This changes everything." "Yes," Rhett said. "Because it changes us, from being the last to being the beginning." The crew felt a tan, unspoken bond tying them to the stars, to each other, to all that had been and all that could. As the Valari's grace turned away from the veil, its course set toward the unknown. They no longer feared the vast emptiness. They understood it was full of stories waiting to be told, songs waiting to be sung, and they would be the ones to tell them. The universe had broken itself open, and humanity was ready to write the next chapter.